Welcome to today's Grace Kingdom Community Center Wednesday Bible Study. Our topic or our subject that has been going on for some time now is journeying with Abraham. We began actually by journeying with Abram, and we moved on from chapter 12 until here in chapter 17. Now we are journeying with Abraham, because the Lord had come to him and had ratified or confirmed the covenant, changed his name from Abram to Abraham, changed his wife's name from Sarai to Sarah. So the conversation is continuing with God speaking to Abraham, still confirming, ratifying his promise to him. Last week when we closed right where we are starting now. So let me start by actually reading from Genesis chapter 17, verse 15. If you're new, thank you so much. Please invite somebody, subscribe, like, share. Genesis 17:15. Then God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name, and I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be from her." That's verse 17. Then Abram fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" And Abram said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Look at this. How Abram is kind of, how would I put this? He thinks he is tricking God, because when God speaks to him about how he's going to get a child, Abram makes the calculation quickly. I'm 99, and then within a year I'll be 100. How do I get a child at 100 and Sarah at 90? And then he laughs in his heart. But outwardly, he is showing an act as if he is worshiping God, but inwardly he's laughing at God. You know, I'm sure you now remember the scripture where God said, "These people, they only come to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." That's exactly what our Father was doing here. And I'm going to be sharing a few things about that in a moment. And then he really opens up and says, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Listen, this really tells me about the reality of a person's journey with faith, one's journey with faith, which we learn from the father, our father of faith, which is Abraham, because God gave him the promise that he is going to give birth to a son, and the son's name is going to be Isaac. But this was not an easy journey. It was not an easy journey. Look at this with me. First, when God promised him to be a great nation, okay, he was of the idea that Eliezer from Damascus would be the one. Actually, he was concerned that Eliezer would be the one, okay? And then Ishmael was born, because God assured him, no, it will not be Eliezer. It was going to be someone born from your body. It is going to be someone born from your body. And at the time, God did not clearly say from you and Sarah. He said from your body. Okay? So, you know what happened. Ishmael was born from Abram and Hagar. He was not yet Abraham. It was Abram and Hagar. So, Abram took it. If you read through the whole thing, even what he is saying here, that Abram took it, now the son has come. Okay? But God said, no, that's not the one. It's going to be you and Sarah. Not this one. Yeah, this one, I listened to what God said to him about Ishmael. Then God said, no, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. That's chapter 17, verse 20. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time next year. So, it started with Eliezer. No, he's not the one. Then it goes to Ishmael. No, he's not the one. There is one coming who is going to be called Isaac. Give him that name, Isaac. Laughter. Like I closed last week when I said, it's almost like God was saying, you are going to laugh, not with the laughter of me failing to fulfill my promise, but me keeping my promise. You will laugh when you see that my promise to you was true, and I kept my word. You know, this teaches us that God keeps his word in his time, not in our time. In his time. The due season of God is according to him, not according to us. And so, God continues to say in verse 21, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this time, to you at this set time next year. Then he finished talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. And on that day, every male was circumcised. Okay? And then we move on to chapter 18. In chapter 18, this is where we see how God now did something. Let me not preempt it. Let's read the Bible first. Chapter 18 begins by saying, then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre. You know, that's where he was living. As he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. Okay, if you are reading the Bible, let's read the Bible. If you are listening to the Bible, hear what the scriptures are saying. Get the story right. Here it says, he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day. Verse 2, chapter 18. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the door and said, my Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Verse 4, please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread that you may refresh your hearts. After that, you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant, they said, do as you said. Now, if you are listening, it appears that as Abraham was sitting, he didn't see them come from far. All of a sudden, they were here. He just saw them next to him. And he knew that that's not human. That's an encounter with God. Now, as you have read, or as you have listened, even from chapter 17, remember God had promised Abram that he's going to have a son, and that son he will have with his wife Sarah. So, Abram is responding to a divine visitation from God. Abram is responding to a divine visitation from God, and he now decides that because the Lord's presence is here, the Lord has decided to come to my house. I want to keep him as long as I can. What do we do? Generosity. Then Abraham jumps into the giving mode, and Abraham starts to prepare a meal for him. He tells his wife, it says in verse 6, so Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal kneaded and make cakes 7. Abraham ran to the head, took a tender, a good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. He is in charge. He's not sending the servants to say, go get me this. No. He is directing every part of this meal because he is aware that the God of all creation has come to his house. Even if you read it from, if you look at it in the Bible, in verse 1 it says, then the Lord, the L is a capital. And in verse 3 when he said, my Lord, if I have found favor in your eyes, the L is also capital. It shows that Abraham was aware that divinity had visited him in human form. It's called a theophany. It's called a theophany. God had come in a form that is human. And then verse 8 he says he took the butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Right? Let's read the whole story before we get into the comments. Then they said, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, in the tent. That is verse 9, 10. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall bear a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, that's verse 11, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing, 12. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, after I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord, being old also? Verse 13, and the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, surely, shall I surely bear a child since I'm old? Verse 14, is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it. I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, no, but you did laugh. And you know that sentence there has got an exclamation mark. So it was a rebuke. You did laugh. So let's analyze this a bit. Okay? So here is Abraham having an encounter with God. Actually, when this divine visitation came, it was for two reasons. The first one was for Sarah to know and to hear that she's going to give birth. So it wasn't really technically for Abraham, because Abraham was already told what was going to happen. Here, God was dealing with kind of finishing the faith of Sarah in him, finishing that faith that would make her believe that she, despite her old age, she will be able to give birth to a son. The second one is where he was going to move on and go and bring judgment to Sodom and Gomorrah. But let's look at this for now. Okay, so if we really look deeper into the whole story, where Abraham and Sarah, why do I keep calling him Abraham? Abraham and Sarah, where they were, it was not the same place. It appears as if Sarah was not exactly where, in terms of information, she was not exactly where Abraham was. She was not, well detailed like Abraham was, who was who had a first-hand encounter with God. And so it's clear from her response that when the angel said she would conceive, that she laughed in her heart. Okay, that's what I'm sort of observing here. And that the other important thing for us to see is that the Lord just appeared, okay? And when Abram realized that it was the Lord, he went into generosity mode, or a mode of entertaining them to keep the Lord with him for as long as it would take. And the best was for him to cook a sumptuous meal for the Lord. And if you think about it, I don't think everything just happened like that. I mean, the dough had to be kneaded, it had to have yeast, it had to raise, a fire had to be made, it had to be put in the fire, the animal had to be slaughtered, all that goes with that. So there was a waiting. So the scripture does not tell us that there was any conversation between the Lord and Abraham. It was just the preparation of the food, and it fast forwards to a point where when the food was ready, it was served to the Lord. And as the Bible puts it, the men who represent the Lord, who are the Lord, whichever way you can look at it, but we can even say the Lord ate. And Abraham was standing there. It was after the eating. It was after the generosity. It was after the meal. It was after the offering, that he said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" Do you see how this generosity of Abraham actually became a conduit to the message that the Lord brought? I'm just wondering if Abraham did not actually detain, quote unquote, detain the Lord through that offering, through that act of generosity. Whether this would have happened or we would have been reading it the way we are reading it today. you have to be able to know that once you detect an unusual presence of the Lord around you, do your best to do whatever comes to you that would cause it to remain with you for as long as possible. It took the time of preparing a full meal and them eating before the message was delivered. If I apply it to you and me, it would mean that there are things that we need to learn to do whenever we sense the presence of God, where we are going to kind of, submit to it and connect to it and draw from it and cause it to remain and not do things that are going to make that unusual presence leave. Because I have this theory that I have seen work, and it is that God does not just come in unusual manners for nothing. If the presence of God just comes in an unusual manner, you have to be able to stay within it and cause it to remain until that which it meant to deliver is delivered. And in this case, the generosity of Abraham unlocked the message. And he says, "Where's Sarah, your wife?" And when Sarah hears the message that the angel is having to her, that she was going to conceive, she was going to conceive Isaac, then Sarah laughs in her heart. Now, here's the thing that made me say, it looks like Abraham and Sarah were not in the same place in terms of faith. Because if Abraham had been pulling Sarah, pulling her along, getting her to be where he was with the Lord. For an example, take for the instance where when God said, talking to Abraham this time, where God said to Abraham, Ishmael will not be the one who is going to be the heir, but I am going to give you a son whom you are going to name Isaac, and you will have this son with your wife, Sarah. Remember what Abraham did? He laughed in his heart. He mocked the fact that God is supposing that at their age they could give birth to physical offspring. The body is wasted. The body is old. They were judging God in terms or using human standards. But God spoke to Abraham and sorted that issue out. Okay? He sorted the issue out. And by the time that presence at that time left, Abraham knew, okay, I am going to have a child with my wife, my old wife. Old me is going to have a child with my old wife. That's why even when the angel, in this instance, came and said, your wife is going to conceive, Abraham did not doubt. He did not laugh in his heart. He was settled with that. But the reaction of Sarah showed that she was not at the same wavelength in terms of understanding this promise with her husband. And that is why she laughed. She laughed in her heart. And so, when she laughed in her heart, Now, this also brings me to the fact that I said, I believe this visitation was not for Abraham, it was for Sarah. It was to settle the matter with Sarah so that Abraham will believe, Sarah will believe, and both of them will become one in terms of believing the promise of God. This visitation was for Sarah. When she laughed, God said, why did Sarah laugh? Obviously, the Bible says Sarah laughed in her heart. She was also mocking, just like her husband did. But the loving, kindness of God was not to immediately condemn. It was to correct. Abraham was not aware. And it's God who showed Abraham, your wife is not believing what I'm saying. And then, when Sarah was made aware that God saw everything about her attitude, God was able to read her heart, and God exposed what was going on in her heart, that she was in unbelief. She said, no, I did not laugh. And God said, you did laugh. Now, let me tell you what I believe happened in Sarah in that moment. Let me tell you what I believe happened to Sarah in that moment. I believe Sarah came to a place where she came face to face with her unbelief. I would not say Abraham did not give her all the details, but Abraham did not give her any details about his interactions with God, the promises. These people had left everything and being there because of what God told them to do. I think the only problem was the fact that now they have grown old, and it seems as if God forgot about them. You understand? But what I think, happened to Sarah at that time is that as she came face to face with her unbelief, then she saw that if she did not say a word, but God heard the laughter in her, He was able to read what was going on. Then the God who is able to tell me what is going on in my heart is able to fulfill His promise. If He can know me to that depth, to that extent, then He can keep His promise. Then we read in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 11, where it says, by faith Sarah herself also, not only Abraham, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Where did she get that strength to believe? I believe this was the place, right here, where she realized, I believe. He knows me. If He knows me, He can make this old body conceive. Listen, there is nothing impossible for God. I believe we are entering a place in the church today where we have to start believing God for miracle, signs, and wonders. That this phenomenon should not be that which is produced by some great man on a stage somewhere in a big meeting, but the ordinary Christian. I believe we are in that time. Well, today's time is up. We pick it up next week and we go further. We have 1 or 2 episodes left just to finish it off. But for now, have a wonderful week further. God bless.